All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rossini Andres, and I am the Director of Admissions at Saatchi. And just want to thank you guys for being with us today online. So today for our graduate webinar series, we actually have a treat. We have 2 alumni from our grad programs that will be joining us today to answer some of your questions, but really to speak about their experience at Saatchi, the student experience, as well as what it was like to live overseas. So today I am joined by, on my far left, Brianna Hayes, who graduated from our MA Art History program in 2016. And then to my immediate left, we're joined by Andrew Gotti, who graduated from our MFA Photography program in 2017. So we're just going to jump into some of the questions that I have prepared for them just to kind of get the conversation starting. But you'll see on the right-hand side that you should be able to just kind of, there's a chat box, so you feel free to ask any of your questions and write it there, and we'll definitely try to get to it at the end of the presentation. So I guess my first question for both of them would be just to speak a little bit about your programs and your experience there. And I'm just going to choose, sorry to put you guys on the spot. I guess I'll start with you, Brianna. So since you graduated from the Art History program, if you could just speak a little bit about the program and your experience with that.
Okay, so the Art History program is a 1-year program. You'll take 5 classes for the fall semester, which is September to December. You'll take 5 for the spring, which is January to April. And then in the summer, you're going to be taking 4 classes total, but they're kind of more directed independent studies where you'll be working on your thesis primarily. And yeah, I mean, you'll go to various field trips. You'll be working with primarily the director of the Art History program, and you'll have a few other kind of mentors to lead you throughout the way. So you get to pick your major professor depending on whatever topic you choose to write your thesis. And you'll just be spending most of your time writing your thesis throughout the whole year.
Perfect, thank you. And
so my experience with the photo department is it's a very small and intimate program, so you get a lot of hands-on attention from the 2 professors, and everything they can't do, they outsource to professionals working in the field. So it's not like you're losing out on opportunities because of the size of the school. And so it's a positive as well because you get that hands-on attention. It's really well balanced. It's more focused at fine art than it is at commercial photography. They do, if that's something you're more interested in, like there's someone I think graduating this year who's more into portrait photography from a commercial standpoint, wedding photography, that kind of thing. And so they help nurture her in that way. But it is more fine art driven. You have equal balance in digital as well as the darkroom printing methods, and as well as history and aesthetics of the medium from the fine art background. And I mean, there's a lot of field trips to see exhibitions. They change every year depending on what's on display. Obviously, we go to the Biennale in Venice to see the contemporary art sphere in its present state, which is a really great opportunity. I mean, it's a really great program. I enjoyed it a lot.
And just to kind of jump off of what you said, like they work with students on what they're interested in. I believe this holds true with all of our programs, but I know Brianna could potentially speak specifically on the Art History program, is if there's something specific you guys are interested in any of our grad programs, the professors are really there to help you and guide. Because I know you were interested in more the contemporary art, right? And so you worked with that with Maria Antonia. And so anything that, you know, you guys may be really specifically interested in, our professors are really there to help you and kind of help develop your skills or your knowledge through that. And I know you both spoke a little bit about the field trips, but I'd like to hear more about the field trips that each of you guys went on for your specific program and how that also helped kind of develop your skills or your knowledge.
I'll go first, I guess. So every year, there's one trip they absolutely always do, which is Perry Photo, which is a huge convention for art galleries and photographers that obviously focus on that medium specifically. And that's a fantastic opportunity. It's an annual event, and so that's one thing they always do. So you do that both first and second year. That really shows you what's happening now as well as what's happened in the past. And it's a chance to see firsthand a lot of these fantastic things that you read about and see in books and everything. So that's a great opportunity. But there's also festivals in Arles, as well as one in Lucca, and there's different photography festivals that happen biannually, or not necessarily every year, that they make a point to go to, or you see. It's just a really diverse program that depends on what's happening at the time. So, for example, while I was there, we went to Milan, we went to Napoli, we went to Torino, we went to Rome. We had trips all over Italy, especially, but also outside of the country, in that Western Europe in general. So, I mean, it's more so focused on seeing work by professional artists in photography, and then you go there, you write about it, you learn about them, and then you're also given time on those trips to go practice and hone your own technique. And so it's not just let's go here and go to a museum and see this and then leave. You're given time to work on your own stuff as well, because with photography, it's not always where you can just sit in a studio like a painting or printmaking or sculpture. You need to be out in the world and see different things to really find your work for a lot of people, depending on what they do. So I think that's one of the positive aspects, is that they really encourage that. So
That's really great. Brianna?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of agree with a lot of what he said. The programs, the teachers, once they know the students that they're working with and the interests that each student has, they will kind of mend the program to meet each of those students' needs. So, for example, I did go to the Biennale as well. It's kind of mandatory for everyone to go there, just because it's a major event. So that's with every program. But for mine specifically, we went to Amsterdam. We were going to meet the director of the Rijksmuseum and get to talk with him about how he came to be in that position and what he does as a director. So it was kind of learning the back end of museums. And while we were there, Maria Antonia, she's the director of the art history program, she pointed out a specific exhibition that would be good for me to go to, because it was photo specific, as well as someone else who was looking into Renaissance. And then I had another girl who's looking into sound art. So she gave us specific exhibitions that we can go to as a group or individually, however we want to go, to see those exhibitions. So even though our main point of that field trip was to go meet the director of the Rijks, we still had many opportunities to apply that field trip to what we were studying.
Right. No, that's great. And I think it's also because anyone can go to these fairs, right, or to these biennales. But I think a special thing with Saatchi is we try to get, the access. So like Brianna just said, that she got to speak to the director of the Rijksmuseum and try to get that special access privilege that you may not necessarily be able to get if you were just a regular visitor. And so I think that's what we definitely try to incorporate in our programs and your courses. So that, you can help develop your skills or your knowledge and kind of also network, because that's also extremely important with grad school. And I know that, Andy, when you spoke a little bit about your experience with the photography program, you kind of hinted on the facilities and what access they get to, like the black and white or the dark room. So I just wanted to talk to you both a little bit about the facilities and what kind of accesses you got. Just so to give you a brief overview, Saatchi, we do have 2 campuses in the heart in Florence, or the historical district. They are about, I would say, a 10-minute walk from each other, but they are about a 10, 20-minute walk from any local museums, restaurants, tourist attractions that you may want to see. So you really do have Florence as your access. But on top of that, you obviously have access to the Saatchi facility, which both of them can explain for each program, the 2 different libraries or studio spaces that they have. Want to start, Andy?
Sure. Okay. So in the photography department, we had 3 separate dark rooms. There's a dark room dedicated for the undergraduate students that come over from the study abroad programs.
Right.
And really the only time you really are in those spaces if you're doing a teaching assistantship. And so we have our own space separate from that. So we're not competing with undergraduates, 20, 50 students, whatever, coming in, sharing chemistry, sharing largers. So we have a dedicated space just for ourselves. And I think that was a great aspect that really allowed us, the freedom to work whenever we wanted and to develop our work, in peace and quiet, really. So think that was a really positive aspect. And so we had a full facility just for us in the MFA department. We had studio space where just like a desk area where you could hang up your work and everything, which is also just a big room that was in this Renaissance Palazzo, which is really beautiful, specifically for our department. And we also had facilities for alternative printmaking in photography. So you had access to platinum palladium technique, cyanotype, and dike process, all these different things that aren't offered in a lot of programs. I never heard about a lot of these things when I was an undergraduate student. And so,
I've never heard about it until now.
Yeah, so it's just, instead of using silver, you're using different metals and different ways of printing. And so those are things that one of the professors is extremely skilled in, and he used to work for Kodak and different labs and stuff doing these things. And so learning from someone who's mastered these techniques in a facility dedicated to that specifically is really great.
Yeah.
And we also have a full service digital lab. There's one for undergraduates as well as one specifically for the graduate department. And so everything's really, there's a lot of overlap as well as separation, which allows, the opportunity. We have multiple printers, plotters, scanners, everything is up to date, contemporary, modern. You really have the ability to do whatever you want in terms of the medium from a technical standpoint.
That's awesome.
Oh, and there's a full service like portrait product studio with lighting and everything. They do focus a lot of attention on developing technique in that area, and they put a lot of effort into making this a really modern space for us. I mean, everything is brand new and really up to date. It's fantastic.
So before we go on to Brianna, I do have a specific question
Sure.
for this photo, which I know some students and prospective students have asked, is about materials. Do they need to bring their own? What do you recommend for that? Should they bring their own photo paper?
Okay, you absolutely need a camera, obviously.
Yes.
That's a given. I mean, I would recommend bringing digital as well as a film, depending on what you do. You'll use one more than the other, probably, but there are tripods and cameras in the department. We had film ones available to us from medium, large format, 35 millimeter format, but there's also a couple of digital options, but less so than that, because generally people have their own for that. There are tripods at your disposal, so it's a bigger thing that you'd have to pack and bring.
Right.
A lot of people don't necessarily have one, but I think it's better to have your own because you're not checking it out constantly.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend bringing tripod cameras for film and for digital. Film, paper, you don't need to bring that stuff. There's plenty of stores.
Okay.
Florence is, really dedicated to the arts, so there's locations where you can buy that stuff there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Right. Perfect. Thank you. Brianna?
Okay. So mine was mainly academic based. So we did have a dedicated area we each got a desk and a computer, printer, so that we can work on our theses and stuff. But as far as facilities, mainly we need access to books. So we were able to work at any library in Florence or even surrounding areas, depending on what you needed, what kind of book you needed. And you could get access only if what you're writing applies to. Like, you'd have to kind of prove in a way that you need to use these books from this library, but then you get access just like the locals do or other universities in Florence do.
Right.
We also had access to when Harvard University brings their students over to Florence, they have this like big, beautiful library space, and we have access to do that. That's kind of one of the first steps that we do is register and go and then be able to use all of those books. And it's just kind of a beautiful area. I can't remember what it's called. But also the library at Saatchi I found was like the best resource for me. It had all the books that any professor would ever suggest to you. And any additional books, I know I needed specific ones for my topic. The librarian was just able to get those books for me.
Isn't there a budget built in to buy books for graduate students?
There was with me. I don't know if it's the thing, but we were all kind of given so much money in the beginning to get the books that we needed. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's good. I had a follow-up question. I'll think of it when it comes to me again. So I will just move on. Oh, that's what I wanted to mention is that I know that they both spoke about having their own space for specific programs. That is held true to all of our graduate programs. So if you are interested in studio art, low res, conservation, communication design, you also get your own studio space or a space for, that's dedicated to that program for you to be able to create and work and study. So that's something that you will be provided when you guys do attend Saatchi. And then I also wanted to ask about the thesis process. How your thesis went, what was the process for it. I guess we'll start with you, Brianna, because you are a shorter term compared to, MFA photography, where it's 2 years, you're just 1 year. So it's very intense. And I feel like you have to start thinking of your thesis when you begin, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. I was kind of lucky because I knew somewhat going into it what I wanted to write about. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but I had a brief idea of what I wanted to explore, which was good because I knew it was going to be in photography, even though I was an art history major. And so they set me up with Jacopo, who's one of the directors of the art history department, photography department. But he ended up being my major professor for the full year. So we can work on this topic. And we started in September and did it simultaneously to me taking classes and worked on it for the full year. So that's something that you definitely need to do is hit the ground running with your topic and begin immediately.
And it's due for your thesis is due in July time frame for you guys. Okay.
Yeah, it's due in July. At the end of every term, you'll be expected to do so much, like the first chapter by the first semester, and that's kind of how it works.
Good.
So for us, the first year, you don't touch on the thesis at all. You're really just kind of looking at the second year students and what they're doing for theirs to really get an understanding of what it is. And then the second year, you're really working intimately with your major professor who's helping guide you through the entire program from the first year to the end, making sure you're staying on track and partnering with the right professionals in the field as well as people in the education sphere to work with and help develop the project you're working on. And they're the person that you would contact saying, I'm interested in this kind of thing. And so you're working one-on-one with one professor. It doesn't necessarily have to be the directors either. So for example, I was working with a professor from a local school in Florence. Okay. You develop a project, you propose an idea at the beginning of the year, you write a written defense throughout the course of the year that it's really outlining with research kind of people that have done similar things to what you're doing, justifying why you're doing it the way you're doing it, and all those aspects that really go into, the higher education artistic sphere that really defend your project as, an art project, as a thesis project. And so you're spending the entire second year, you're spending half of your credit hours, I think, working on this project. And so that's something that you're obviously working in other classes, you're doing TAs the second year, a lot of people, so you're working with the undergraduate students, helping them learn the technique and everything, but you're also really dedicated to this one specific thing, and it varies student to student drastically. We had a student who was working with, he was a photography student doing a lot with ceramics and printing photographs on ceramics through a liquid light technique. And then there was myself and another student really interested in photography and books. And so we were working a lot with the guy who won awards at a photo festival in Arles for that. And so, it's really customized to the person.
That's good. And then more for you. I know there's a thesis show for the MFA Studio Art, Photography, and Communication Design at the end of your time with us. And I just want you to speak a little bit about that process as well, what the show was like, who was invited.
So at the end of your second, you have a show at the end of the first year as well as at the end of the second. The end of the second year is the thesis show. So you're showing a portion or the entirety of your body of work. Most people, there's not enough space for the entire body of your work because it's all of the studio art students as well as all the photography students and possibly the communications design, depending on what their work is. And so the school rents out a gallery partnering with a local space in Florence in the city center area. And we put up a show. You're doing the printing if you're in photography, obviously, in the painting, they're doing the framing for their work. And you're really splitting responsibilities a lot. You're putting together flyers and adverts, and you're creating this whole process to prepare you to be an artist working in the field.
Right.
But there is help through the school. I mean, they book the travel to, like, the taxis to carry the artwork from the gallery to the studios and back and forth. They supply money for the opening, for the food. They do a lot of the invitations and partnering with their mailing list to set up so that there's a lot of attention throughout the Florence art community to this, which we had a really fantastic turnout. Our show was up for, I think, a little less than a month.
Okay.
But happens right in April at the end of the first year, the second year. And it was a great experience. I mean, it's challenging working in group shows always.
Yeah. So many cooks in the kitchen, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it worked out well.
Yeah. And is there a person who curates the show normally, or it's just kind of a group cohesive effort and just?
In the past, I know that Daria, one of the contemporary art history professors, was doing curation, deciding I want these pieces from these people and these ones from those.
Okay.
But I think they've gone away from that more, and they're having the studio art director kind of do it in a more Felipe.
Okay.
He was doing more of a let's all meet together and democratically decide how to cut up the space, and if we want to separate everyone into this is this student, this is that one, or if we want to run things together so that everyone's kind of overlapping and interlace to create you're obviously picking an idea for the whole show as well, which is really challenging because everyone's working on completely different topics. So, so some of this person's best work might not fit with the theme that you've all collectively decided on, which is really challenging because you want to show everyone wants to put their best foot forward. Right. And so that is an aspect that's hard, but that's something you have to deal with working in this field.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And there's one other thing I'd want to bring up, which is new after Brianna and Andrew both graduated, is that the admissions office here actually just moved into a gallery space in New York. And we're actually located in the Chelsea district of New York. There's a lot of galleries around us. And one of the new things that we're going to start actually this year is a thesis show for every studio practice, so photography, communication design, and studio art, where they actually will be shipping some of their students' materials and artwork here to New York, where we can actually have what we're calling also kind of an MFA thesis show for these students, so that they also get to bring, what they're working on, what they learned in Florence back here to the US and try to make connections here as well. And how we're trying to incorporate the MA art history is that they will most likely be helping with some of the publications, the write-ups, the cataloging of these students' artwork, so that we can also have that as part of the shows, but also to have that as their resumes and hopefully, for the student resumes moving forward. Another thing that just started for the graduate programs that was also after Brianna and Andrew was that they started doing open studios. Actually, no, it started with you, right?
Yeah, while we were there. So,
okay, so then do you mind speaking a little bit about how the open studios are?
Multiple times throughout the year, we would have, they'd give us notice a few weeks ahead of time, maybe a month ahead, saying that we're going to open up the studios and invite people from the local education art community to come visit and see what you're working on. And so everyone clean up their space, get everything presentable, and it's an opportunity to meet people in a less, it's in a professional kind of space, but it's a lot less like collar, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's,
not as formal.
Yeah, it's a lot more relaxed way to talk about your art and get feedback from people you might never have contact with. So you have, I had all sorts of different people I was meeting, and it's also an opportunity for you to go and see what the other departments are working on, which is something that I think people struggle with. Everyone gets kind of in their little tunnel and they go in that direction. So. You go walk around, you see what everyone's working on, and everyone puts they have out there. So
yeah, and I was actually fortunate enough to attend one when I was in Italy on campus this past November, and it was a really great turnout. And it was really just nice to see, you know, the students that I've connected with through the admissions process and what they're working on now. So it's a really good opportunity, and a lot of the Florence community that are not part of Saatchi were actually there asking questions. So I just think it's a really good way to get our students out there, and how they incorporate, because obviously MA Art History is not a studio practice. They actually had some of the MA Art History just talk about, you know, their thesis or what they're working on and looking forward to working on throughout their program a little bit in the beginning before everyone actually got to move in to look at the studio space. So I know there's that divide between MA Art History being a little more academic versus the studio. So we definitely try to incorporate everything for the grad programs together. So my next set of questions for you guys, it's either or can answer. If you both feel like answering, feel free to. But I just wanted to get a sense of your time in Italy, how that kind of helped you with your practice and your knowledge. And Brianna, since Andrew has been speaking quite a lot right now, I'm going to start with you with this question.
Okay. That's a heavy question.
It is. But I feel like with art history, there's a lot to learn, right?
Yeah, it's kind of obvious. It goes hand in hand
right.
with studying art history in Florence. Even though I primarily focused on contemporary art, specifically contemporary art theory and criticism, and I also specifically spoke about photography. So that may sound a little random in reference to where I was, but I actually found, for me, it doesn't really matter what you're studying. The history that is Florence, Italy, and the Renaissance and everything, I feel like you need that as a basis or kind of a backbone to move forward in the arts. I mean, without that history, we wouldn't have contemporary art today, or we wouldn't have what we have today. So, and just the way art was looked at and talked about and appreciated back then really kind of fit with what I was talking about, contemporary art theory and criticism. Because it's a whole different world now. And so it was good to kind of have that as a basis for, you know, as a springboard. So, yeah, I mean, I just feel like everyone's going to need that knowledge to study art history regardless.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess this question's for either of you guys too. And I know that some concerns that we would get from students is, you know, the networking, especially if they want to move back to the US eventually, and how they can bring that back here. And I know that's one of the biggest reasons we got the gallery space, was so that they can come back here and network. But what would you say to a student who, you know, is kind of iffy about moving to Italy because of those reasons? Either or, you guys?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I think it is challenging networking with the American kind of
absolutely
sphere a little more, but I mean, you've got a lot of connections there, and so it's just apples or oranges kind of situation. It's just what you're choosing. And I mean, if you're an ambitious, motivated person, it's not something that'll stand in your way.
Right.
But it is a hurdle that someone who goes to a school in America might not have to face as strongly. But it obviously every school is different. If you're going to,
I think it's just challenging for grad school in general too.
Yeah,
but
I think it totally depends where you go and who you're working with. But I built a lot of fantastic connections in Italy as well as Europe in general.
Right.
And some of those things have translated here as well. Not all of them do, but that's how it is for every place. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think also with the faculty members, as I get to, you know them, and you guys obviously know them more because you've spent time with them. They also have some connections back here that you potentially could tap into as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can definitely use that. Another question that I forgot to ask earlier was, why did you guys choose Saatchi over any other program that you may have been looking at?
I can answer this one.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, it's kind of a long story. I did apply to about 4 different schools for grad school. I got accepted to 3 of the 4, and Saatchi was one of them. And I was actually choosing whether I should go to school in New York or in Europe. Those were the 2 that I wanted to go to. But honestly, being my age, having only lived in the U.S., I felt like there was a lot of personal growth I needed to do, and being able to travel and see different cultures and country, I mean, that's something that I think kind of helps learning. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
just academic or education. It's personal learning that you need to do to have. And so, and it was just kind of one of those opportunities. It's either you take it now or you might never take it.
Mhm.
And I also had a few mentors. I used to intern at the Denver Art Museum, and a few of them did go to school in New York. And they said if they kind of wanted to go back in time and they would have traveled, they would have chosen that decision. So it was that for me, it was the ability to see other cultures and
Yeah.
be in Europe independently, away from like no contact with family, essentially. And the U.S. will always be here,
Right.
so that's kind of how I saw it.
Good. So do you need to know Italian is another question that we get a
No.
lot.
I studied Italian during my undergraduate degree, and so I had a lot of basis with the language, but Brianna didn't study at all before entering the school. And Florence is an extremely touristic city in a sense, and so it's very English friendly. You can get around never speaking a single word of the language and you'll be fine.
Okay.
All the classes are taught in English. Everything is the library is full of English books. I mean, there's no issues at all with the language. Would I advise that people,
Yeah.
do a little Rosetta Stone first? Yeah. I think it's good for you as a person to
Right.
try and engage with the local people
Sure,
in their own language. It makes you more likable and that you're giving an effort. But that's not something you have to do if you're not good at languages.
It's
There's
not
no reason
necessary. Yeah. And
I will add that for the art history program, you will have to take Italian courses because some of the materials that you'll be getting will be in Italian, especially if you do go to different museums and you have to kind of translate the language to learn what you're going to be, or to read what you're going to be talking about and learning about. So it is required unless you've already, like someone like you who've already taken it, would not have to repeat it again.
Right, and you can test out of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. With studio arts, you don't have the opportunity to take the language as a course. You can audit it, obviously, but that's not for credit because it doesn't fit into the curriculum.
Right.
But the school does also set up a lot of exchanges with local Florentine schools for Italians, where you can work with a local who's around your age or in the vicinity, and so you'd meet for coffee or whatever. And you speak in Italian, and they help teach you that. They speak in English, and you help teach them. And so the school is well connected in that way as well. And so, if you're really interested in getting better at the language, all the options are there to do that.
Another question is, how do you feel Saatchi helped you prepare for your future or your career?
Okay, so I'll start on this one. So I came from a studio art background in photography. Well, I first came from a commercial background in photography and then fine art. And so then I knew my next step was to do art history. That's kind of where I realized I didn't want to be an artist and I wanted to be more behind the scenes of the art world in museums and galleries. And so that was my next step, to get an art history degree. I felt like Saatchi gave me the opportunity to mesh my background in with what I wanted to do in the future. And so I felt like it helped me with that. It helped me not just kind of let go of my past. And it was an easy transition. So that's kind of where I felt like it helped me. As far as having an art history degree, obviously, can get you into teaching, get you into working in galleries or museums. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And can either of you guys speak a little bit about the moving process, like moving overseas and how that went? Maybe how it was to obtain a visa. Was it scary? We definitely get a lot of questions about that, and just how it was for you, or either of you.
Yeah, I think moving overseas, everyone's looks at it like this really ominous thing.
Yeah.
And I won't be able to buy my shampoo there.
Yeah.
I won't have, so you end up packing everything. You don't really need any of it. So they have clothing stores. You don't need to pack as much as you think. And so everyone comes with tons of luggage, and then you don't really have space to bring back things that you buy or whatever. But the visa process is it's a little complicated, but that's just bureaucratic things in general. It's like applying for a passport. It's any of those things. You have to get a lot of documentation, and it is stressful to think about. But I mean, if you just follow the steps, it makes sense. It's really, you check the boxes and everything, and you're fine. So it is daunting to think about, but as long as you're punctual and you get things in early, you won't have any issues with the visa.
Okay.
The flight, I know SACHI does a group flight option, which sets up the travel for you, or you can pursue it independently as well.
Okay.
I flew independently for the most part. I did go on a group flight though, so you get to meet some people that are going either a graduate program or the undergraduates. Before you go, while you're at the airport, you can chat, and so it feels like you're not going alone if you're doing that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some people, it's their first experience moving that far away.
Right.
You're half the world away from the States, and so that might help people with nerves a bit, or the parents that are nervous about sending their kids away.
Did either of you guys live in SACHI housing, or did you choose to do independent housing? And if so, why?
I chose independent housing. I know SACHI provided housing where you'd be living with other graduate students, but in my experience, most of the graduate students that did go to SACHI housing, they did that because they weren't sure about the market there. They didn't speak the language necessarily, and they were a little scared about things and up independently, which is reasonable. I mean, it's kind of stressful just doing it here. But I think the majority of the students that went through SACHI housing in the graduate program, they had housing because everyone values their privacy. They want to live alone, find where they want to live in the city or area they like the best, and so I found that most people took the SACHI housing, and then after a semester I found my own beforehand. I worked with an agency locally, and how
did you find that agency? Just Google?
I found them online initially, and I worked with people through email, and then I was there in person.
Okay.
It's a pretty simple process.
Okay. That's good to know. And then I know also Daniela, who is our housing director, if you do choose to do independent housing and you do need help too, she is more than willing and able to help as well, to talk to agents or whatever you need for that process. And then I just have 2 last questions for you guys, and then we can end our session. But do you have any advice for students that are currently applying or will be applying in the future to the program? I'll start with Brianna.
I touched on this before. I would just say if you're entering the MA in Art History program, to already begin thinking about what you're going to write about, just so that you can start immediately. I would say not to be scared by moving across the country, across the world, just because, the year will go by so quickly. And I wish I had more time there, I guess I would say. So I wouldn't be scared to just kind of be on your own and get that independence. I would just say go for it. Like he said, don't pack a lot. I made that mistake and then bought a bunch and then didn't have room. I guess that's it.
Yeah. One last question, and I'll end it with you, Andrew, if you don't mind. Since you had a 2-year program, what did you spend and I know for SACHI, they don't have, for the graduate programs, there are no summer courses. So just an idea of what you did over your summer vacation.
So between the first and second year, I spent a lot of time traveling around Europe or during the breaks as well. I went to different countries. I think I was in 11 or 12 different countries over the course of the first year, all the way up to being the second. Saw like 45 different cities. I got to see a lot of different cultures, experienced different things that I never would have had the opportunity to. And one of the greatest things I did was I got to go to museums and all these places and see firsthand a lot of this fantastic artwork that was really there, architecture, try different foods, and really went all over. And it's really affordable to do that, whereas I flew to Belgium for like 40 euros from Florence round trip with like Ryanair. The trains really, it's really easy to travel. And everything's so small that you jump on a plane for 2 hours, you're in a completely different world. And I I think that's a valuable personal growth kind of experience.
Absolutely.
I know the facilities are open though during the summer. One of the people in my program was there working in the studio constantly. She's that kind of person.
Right.
So you do have access to the facilities if you are interested in really pushing yourself in that direction.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, thank you both for being here and answering our questions. Just a couple of announcements before we end the session that our scholarship deadline for those who are applying for fall 2018 is coming up. It's actually next week. It's on March 15th. For those who are not applying for scholarship deadline and are just applying for any of our grad programs, that application deadline will be May 1st. And then also we still have a couple of more openings for portfolio review. So for those of you who are still interested and not quite sure if you want to apply or have not fully submitted your application and would like to get your portfolio review to get some critique on it before you submit your portfolio for admissions, you definitely can do that, and you would be talking to the director of that specific program that you're interested in. So you can definitely find that on our website, and you can log on or RSVP there for any of the time slots that are available to you. And that's it. Thank you guys for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that this was helpful and informative, and that we see you in Florence soon. Bye.